There and welcome to Company of Penal Battalions. As somebody that's taken 5 months away from the game because real life happens sometimes, I've been able to come into this winter balance patch at 1.5 having just read the notes and had bits of meta feed through to me through friends, and I've been able to have a little bit more of an outsider's opinion and have a look at what's been happening with regards to penal battalions and the overemphasis of trying to use them as a platform for greater change. And I'd just like to possibly try and perhaps cause an intervention for the community, and I repeat, community modders. And I'm emphasising the word community because these guys are fantastic. They're doing what I presume is unpaid work because Relic don't have the resources allocated to balancing this game anymore. They are, on behalf of us, doing their best job possible to try and balance this game. But do you remember those surveys you got given about 4 or 5 months ago? They resulted in a scope, and this scope has meant that they're only able to change specific units and specific avenues of the game. They can't change everything. They can just change small things. And obviously, there's been a prevalent Soviet meta of Soviet partisans with flamethrowers and guards. No conscripts, just those two infantry units. That's been the prevalent meta, and people are bored of it. It is stale. So you've got guys like Mirage of Flaw, Mr. Smith, and Callum of General's Gentlemen. They have tried to fix this meta just through using penal battalions. Penal battalions, which are a flavour unit based on a small niche aspect of World War II. And they have tried to make them into an Apache helicopter multi-weapon platform. And I absolutely hate to see something so against the aura and against the kind of spiel of authenticity that Company of Heroes tries to create. And I'd hate to see a community artificial element with a bad backstory of trying to overstretch what scope you're given. I'd hate to see that implemented, and I'd love to try and instigate a bit of what you would want, I'd like to call an intervention. So, just to give some feedback, first of all, let's talk about what they've done so far, because they have very valid reasons for doing everything they've done. These guys are clever guys. These guys are community heroes. They're very talented and experienced. But so if you read the story of what they've done, it tells where we're at and why we're at where we're at. To get a little bit too verbose there. Penals in 1.1 of this patch. The combination equipped with flamethrower is a bit too great. We needed to nerf it, so we have done. We've removed the flamethrower. The Vet 3 accuracy has been decreased, and the population cap's been increased. Veterancy requirements are also nerfed. So that was a quadruple nerf of penal battalions. A little bit OTT, you'd argue, but I do know they were in a very powerful position. That's 1.1. Let's drag the bar down here to 1.2. To continue our attempts at finding a good fit for penals, we are going to trial, so this is only a trial, a second version. This time we're restoring part of the veterancy. However, we're going to give the demo charge, make it more affordable, so as to give the Soviets a potential ammo sink, because in high-level play, a lot of Soviet players end up floating too much ammunition, and that's always been a strange element of that faction. So they've reverted the accuracy bonuses, because they probably sensed they'd nerfed them too much, and they also reverted some of the other nerfs. Accuracy weakened, so they kind of just did a little bit of a balancing act here. They didn't go too crazy on it, but here's where it gets interesting. We're also experimenting with adding some anti-tank utility to T1, making T1 openings more diverse and less commander dependent, giving players a reason to consider back-teching, allowing for more use of the M3 scout car and sniper team. Thus, penals get access to a PTRS package with the following perks. Upgrading to the PTRS package will prevent the penals from using URAR, and the upgrade costs 60 munitions. This, in my opinion, is where they started to lose their way. And I'd like to introduce what penals actually were with regards to the theme of the Soviets at the time. The Strafbat were based on the Nazis' usage of prisoners and penal battalions. Okay, Stalin saw that it was useful, and when they got their asses kicked in the first part of the war, 1941, in Barbarossa, and they were back all the way back to the suburbs of Moscow, the culture changed, and Stalin got a lot more hardline, introducing the famous Order 227, etc. And it was very small numbers of the Red Army were utilised in suicidal ways. They were punished for their cowardice, and they were pushed into combat against the odds and against any survivability, any sense of survivability. It was absolutely sordid stuff, a real dark page in Russia's history, and this is why Russians were really pissed off at Relic back in 2013 for over-focusing on a very small segment of the war. And although 400,000 men were possibly in penal battalions, obviously these statistics can't be fully trusted, it's a small segment because the Red Army was massive, like 20 million men. So it's very small, very few of them ever survived the war, so anecdotes are very sparse, even pictures are hard to find. This is one of the only known photos of penal battalions. A lot of the famous, not all Soviets in a squad had a gun. That comes from the penal battalions because they weren't fully kitted out. Penal battalions were genuinely seen as suicide squads. They were there because they had not been executed. They should feel lucky they weren't executed. They were only given the idea of redemption through propaganda from the NKVD, or just to keep them going, because they were going to die. Most of that 400,000 men died, did not survive the war. The idea now that they are given upgrades where they can have 3 times PTRS anti-tank rifles, something that a piece of kit that was very highly sought after. It just doesn't make sense, and it's not that Company Heroes 2 is realistic, because it isn't, but it's always been vaguely authentic. And that vague authenticity allows people such as myself that have a hard-on for military history, allows us to have a bit more immersion in the game and to enjoy the theme of the game. Otherwise, why wouldn't we be playing Total War or StarCraft? No, we like World War II history, and that's our thing. The 20th century, small skirmish combat. Company Heroes is a great emulator of it. And to try and... let's go back to the patch notes. To try and give Tier 1 as a whole a massive new lease of life through getting the penal battalions to suddenly be an Apache helicopter multi-weapons platform, it's just crazy, and it's just overthinking the scope of what the modders were given, in my opinion. And again, I apologise to the modders if you're watching this, and I presume you possibly will watch it. And you have I've participated in lots of these the earlier mods, and not the alphas, the betas, etc. And the guys that really grind their nose into the ground to try and get Relic to do the best patches manageable always had my respect. And these 3 guys who are actually doing it themselves have even more respect from me. But as I say, I could wax lyrical all day. Let's go on. They carry on with the changes. There's more of them, and I'm sure everybody watching this has seen these changes. We've all read through them, and I'm just now going to go through them very quickly, just to show just how much thought and effort. This is the stage, by the way, where there ended up being 2 tiers of upgrades, so not, well, 4 tiers in total, because you've got a branch system where there were then an extra tier on the end of each branch, so 4 possible upgrades to the penal battalions. And it just got out of hand, massively out of hand, all with the idea of creating a more diverse meta for Soviets. So this is the example here. Currently, you can equip PTRS 80 munitions, or you can go and upgrade Molotovs, and once that's upgraded, let's make everything instant. Or you can have the PPSHs, which nerfs obviously the long combat range, or you can have the PTRS, which gives access to the anti-tank satchel charge. And all of this, to me, does give off a little bit of a, no offence, amateurish air. I mean, they've done the best with what they can, but look at the icons used. They're borrowed from another commander with it for the Sturmovik bombing raid on tanks. I can't remember its exact name. As I say, I've been away from the game for a while. And it all just gives off an air of, it's not quite right, it's not the right feeling for this unit. It just looks. It's 3 years into this game's life cycle, and to try and take the penal, and all of a sudden give it two possible different usages, and it's completely against the idea of a penal battalion. It just does not make sense. My suggestion, because I'm not a negative person, I've my negativity out of the way, to try and give a suggestion, and I have been to try and give a suggestion. Penal battalions need to be penal battalions. They need to actually be inherently fit their descriptions, fit their voice dialogue, fit all the assets in place for these guys. Flamethrowers do kind of make sense, but in Company of Heroes we've always been told that if you have a frontline infantry unit with a flamethrower and it has more than 4 men, you're going to have a bad time in terms of balance. We've had patches such as the USF a rifleman flamethrower upgrade of the infantry company, or whatever the hell it was called. That was horrendous. That drove more top level players away from the game than any other patch, and it was right before SNF, and it was horrendous. Now we've got Penals running amok with flamethrowers. We should have learnt our lesson. Basically, it doesn't matter if you put it behind Molotovs. Having a flamethrower on a frontline troop, even if it does seem a little bit like what a penal battalion should have, it's just strange. It doesn't quite make sense. And the PTRS, obviously, you've gathered, it is completely. So what am I suggesting? I suggest you nerf the cost of penal battalions, reduce the cost dramatically. Currently, from tier 1, which I should have up because I've got penal battalions on the floor. Oh no, I didn't. I just used the spawner. So let's currently make tier 1. From tier 1, penal battalions cost 300 munitions because, of course, the SVTs were for a long while very powerful. So they had to increase the cost. I suggest decrease the cost and make them a unit that is expendable. Give tier 1 a reason. Satchels, great idea. I mean, we've all seen the satchels. They're very dangerous for the penal battalion in question, and that is in keeping with the theme of a penal battalion. Causes good damage. Well, it used to. I don't know what's happened there. It used to cause good damage. It used to wipe out 2 of the members of the squad, and that was a great theme. This is controversial now. This is just an idea. I don't know how much more thought you want to put into penals. To be honest, I think the modders are probably sick of even thinking about them. But whatever happened to not one step back? The mechanics for it are in the game. The idea that a penal battalion can retreat is utterly not in keeping with the theme of a penal battalion. The idea that they can retreat is just alien to the whole concept of a penal battalion. Perhaps instead of retreating, they could hit the dirt and become ultra resilient, and then be ultra resilient until the point of death, and thus create a concept of, if you want to keep a point, you throw a penal battalion at it. It's got its satchels, and it can just sit there and soak up damage until it dies. That would be a fantastic utility for tier 1. It would help keep elements of the map. And the idea that we need anti-tank in tier 1, it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I mean, we've only got 3 units to work with, so it is very difficult, and I believe snipers have had a cloaking, arguable nerf, depending on how you look at it, if you are a bug exploiter or not. Cough bot and cough price. But yeah, it's going to be difficult to try and make it work, but all I'm saying is don't overextend yourselves and don't overthink what you're doing, because you'll ruin the theme and you'll ruin the feel. So an element could be the whole not one step back. You sit at the floor and you stay there until you die. And that would be a good utility of penal battalions. That is just my suggestion of something to experiment with if you're not already sick of it. But please, for God's sake, don't give them elite weaponry and don't make them a multi-weapons platform. It just does not make sense, and it ruins the theme of the unit. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.